Now for the analyzation of the news. I'll just read through them all and then we'll see what we can do. Hormones keep you alive. Neurons keep you wondering if there's a purpose in being so, of course. Good urban advice. To be sure of stability, be dull. When it comes to the matter of the simple and the complex, hormones and neurons each have their own individual preferences. It was a feature from our food and nutrition desk. Accepting what other people have already thought is a form of dumpster diving. I think in some areas that's known as dumpster dining also. But I assume you people are sophisticated and debonair enough to know what it means. When I stop at a half a cliche. Suave and debonair. What passes for knowledge amongst the ordinary is far too simple and direct. Hold it before you jump to concussions. That is too simple and direct in that it is always only half of what should be simple and direct. The continuity of an ordinary man is in the repetition of what he thinks. Somebody figure out how to make the numbers fit up with the reading. Thinking for any other reason than enjoyment is like eating only to stay alive. And according to the legend on this one world, all civilians, at the immediate moment just before they die, all suddenly think, boy, did I ever miss the boat. A man who can think for himself can live with himself. A man who can think for himself can live by himself. One of the easiest ways to pretend that you're somebody special is to divide up everybody into two groups and then place yourself in one of them. Additional verbal picturizations from our dictionary. Critics, anuses with only a tenuous connection to alimentary canals. If crudeness makes you laugh, you're still too crude. Conversation in an off-white bordered by a nice cobalt blue. Man's environment shapes him as surely as water does a fish. That is patently absurd. Well, perhaps I'm wrong. I'll read this one, but I'll be damned if I... No, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say I'm not going to get around to analyzing it. I won't say that. I'll just arrange that we'll run out of time. Well, I'm sure that somebody just wanted to hear it again because you probably thought that you missed something. So here it is. Sewer rats and the bathroom fixtures industry were the two groups. They were the ones who first came up with the whole concept of fairness. The simple is humorous, the complex, interesting, and humorous. All right. Now that we've done our perfunctory duty, on to describing what a lumberjack, how the news should be understood. Many times on these news broadcasts, as those of you who are faithful viewers and attendees here at the studio know, mention is made of two great groups. We'll get to that in a minute. The simple and the complex. And not just groups of people, but it has to do with the perception of life. It has to do with the, primarily, if you get down to an operational level, of the way in which an individual mind is working. And ordinary people, that is, an ordinary mind, the people are not of any consequence. But it catches people's interest if you start off talking about minds. It sounds far too theoretical. People want to hear about what? People. Because there's always a chance, once we start talking about people, that we might talk about you. And then it makes your day. But remember, the people are of no consequence except for you people who are humanitarians or support, UNICEF or something, or religion, and then I know that people are real important. All right. The simple and the complex. Just two words. They have no metaphysical, mystical meaning other than the fact that I've used them so many times, and if any of you can see the invisible turban that sometimes appears above my head, especially during the semi-equinox, during the time of Sagittarius. The simple and the complex. The simple, in the sense of the human intellect, to have to make comparisons, since we have to dance with words, that is, one word has to push another, or it would have no definition, would have no meaning, would not convey anything at all. The simple refers to the ordinary state of a man's mind, no matter who you are, assuming that you are reasonable, ordinary, and not genetically flawed to the point that would be noticeable. That if you're just ordinary middle class, walking around sane, then for the sake of what we're trying to point out, you have a simple mind. And this is not an insult, because you can be very educated and be full of facts, amongst other substances. You can be full of facts. But a simple mind is a mind, we can describe it in many ways, that ordinary people, again, could take to be very non-mystical and immediately jump on, and they say, talk about a surprise. But you could say a simple mind is what the ordinary mind is, with an ordinary person that is. It is never stuck for an answer. Anything of any consequence to that mind, by their own definition, not ours, but anyone who considers whatever the area was, politics, religion, sports, if they consider it important, they have very direct opinions. Once you get around the point that their limbic system begins to light up behind their eyes, and you realize that you have finally pushed their correct interest button, they have very direct opinions and ideas. That's why they're interested. And they're very simple. It's such as saying, what do you think about the Democrats now being in the White House? What I think about it, I think we'll be lucky to survive the next 4 years. Nice and simple. And I'm not commenting either way. That's with no consequence if you're going to think. I just picked out politics. But you notice it is simple. Now, he may then follow it up with a barrage of facts, quotes, plagiarized tidbits from here and there. And so it may appear to be a complex web of supporting evidence, opinions, theories, readings he's done. But it's simple. Do you understand? You say, what do you think of so-and-so? What I think, and he's got a simple opinion. Who is going to win the American League pennant this year? And somebody's got an interest in baseball, he's going to tell you immediately. Very simple. And we're not saying whether he's correct. We're not saying that if he picks out whatever team it was, and you go, good God in heaven, they don't have a chance. That's not it. If they have a direct, immediate, partisan, and of course it's always plagiarized, that is, they're shilling for life, opinion, idea, belief, feeling on the subject, it is simple. That is a simple mind. Now that is all that's necessary to get by in life. That in fact at the ordinary level, if somebody's mind gets unsimplified or never gets simplified to the proper degree, we're talking about ordinary people, they in fact are crippled. And they will in fact end up normally in a home. They will be perceived to be less than just minimally intelligent and conscious. We're not talking about somebody who can think. We're not talking about we're talking about out in ordinary life, if you went up to a man, he appeared to be ordinary, and you tried to strike up a conversation, and you started saying, you keep up politics? Maybe the guy says, well, yeah, I watch, TV. And you said, what do you think about the Democrats, after all this time, finally getting the White House and some of the proposed plans and the change in the general fiscal outlook of the government? And the man goes, well, I've heard about that, and I thought, at first I went, well, I thought, well, wait, they're going to raise, and you go, yeah. They're going, well, yeah, I thought, no, they can't. Let's see, if they're going to raise, if they're trying to increase the revenue, but they always won't spend, or is it them that won't spend less? Is it them that keep saying we should do? I'm exaggerating perhaps a bit. The point is, if that went much further, and the man was quite serious, and you were just ordinary and being quite serious, you would begin to very shortly think that this man may be 2 or 3 shingles loose. Something is wrong. Whether you agreed because you couldn't tell what he's saying. He said he had an interest, and he attempted to reply, and it was like he went nowhere. He was not simple enough. Or even if he did talk better than I just made up as I went along, if he did start rambling on and still didn't seem to express a real opinion, if he says, yes, politics, yes, the new administration. And he went into something that amounted to, I don't mean that he intended it, but ended up as being a kind of operational form of double talk. Just babble. And you kept listening, and it sounded like he got somewhere, and he got through, and he seemed to satisfied himself that the sentence was complete, and you listened. And it was like he shot an arrow that turned into some kind of, a Gumby arrow. It just went in all kinds of directions. It has to be simple. And vis-a-vis, do-si-do, back-to-back, compared to that, what we're inferring, that if you could do something, which of course you can't do, to actually affect your genetic makeup, not muscles and nose and all that, but here, the neurogenetic makeup, then that would be what we have been in the news items referring to comparably as a more complex mind. May I point out again, this does not mean that you have more education. That doesn't mean that you've read more magazines each month on politics, to use that example. It doesn't mean that. But it means that you are not simple-minded. You are not ordinary-minded. You are not partisan. Now, there was an item here. Since we've used that several times, there's a couple of items here that I might laughingly say, since some of you know it's one of my relatives that sometimes works in the news department in the writing and has a hand in some of this, and so I can make fun of it in a sense, but it's a trick. Several of them. One of them says, what passes for knowledge amongst the ordinary is too simple and direct. Which you might, if you had followed into this, you might, wait a minute, must be a misprint, a typo, because that is almost contrary to what you were saying. What passes for knowledge amongst the ordinary is too simple and direct. That is too simple and direct in that it is always only half of what should be simple and direct. Of course, I can make this very clear. At another level, a more complex view of anything is that which is very simple and direct, but not partisanly so, which is why you can't explain it. It's the sorts of things that a news item from last time pointed out, that there are many things, many obvious things in life that life obviously does not want anybody to mention. Because if you mentioned it, it would be a nonpartisan observation. It would be far too close to a clinical piece of surgery. It wouldn't hurt anybody else because other people can't even hear it. But it's to actually see the obvious, but you can't see the obvious, the plain and the simple, if you're looking with a partisan mind, because that is far too simple and direct. But before you go, wait a minute, we're getting drowned. No, because it's far too simple and direct in that you're only seeing half of what it should have been simple and direct. It's like staring at a point-blank wall, which is too late once you can talk, but it's like almost seeing a point-blank wall at another level, but you cannot see all of it. All you can see is from the baseboard up. Just all real allegories finally fail. But it's like you can only see half of it. And so you cannot say, well, I have now reached the point that I can directly, simply, pristinely face up to point blank obvious reality. No, you can't. Now, if you're ordinary, you can face up to half of it, which is a big deal, say I sarcastically, because anybody can face up to it halfway. Like they got a choice, that's all they can do. So that kind of simple and direct is too simple and direct. But then what would be the more complex of that version of simple and direct? It would be nonpartisan awareness of the obvious. Which, I'm saying this kind of loosely, you got no business doing. 16, 17 people at a time on the planet doing it, what the hell does life care? So when I say you shouldn't be doing it, those of you of great conspiratorial leanings, or would-be unreconstructed mystics that like to think, well, I'm off on some great mission, and it is such a mission that the forces probably of evil don't want me to succeed. The forces of low vibrations, or whatever kind of talk they use nowadays, the slow, low vibrations, the evil spirits are still afoot on this planet. They don't want me to succeed. Yeah, that's a great notion. That's in the same ballpark. There was another one tonight, as you noticed, that said that men totally lost love to believe that they are on a mission. It just fits perfectly. Next time that if you're ordinary, that you might consider seeking advice from a professional, especially a professional in a soft area, such as religion or psychology. Those who love to really wind up and whine, preach, get down to it and holler, woof, woof, rather than the alternative that was pointed out tonight, that those who actually holler woof, woof would be closer to it if they knew, instead of hollering woof, woof, would be holler, over here, Dumbo, Dumbo. What I started to say is, I'm sure all of you know by now, is ordinary people love to have the belief that they are again confronted and playing with the idea that trying to do something in any way extraordinary in life, it always keeps one just one step ahead of martyrdom. If not literally, at least laughs after you because you're getting so smart, you're getting so insightful that the forces of evil, the forces of darkness, of low, dreary vibrations are always right behind you, trying to pull down a stalwart, insightful person like yourself. Yes, yes. And along those lines was no one tonight that said, flash, bulletin. The really intelligent are always moody. See, I knew you'd like that. It's like those who believe that they're off on some kind of great tangent, mission, journey. They always believe that they're just one step ahead. That some kind of dark conspiratorial forces, whether they think about them as being religiously evil or some other version like the dull vibrations of the universe, that something's always after them. It's only the stupid, it's only the witless, it's only those who are torpid and dull themselves believe something's after them. Think about it. That's one of those obvious things that nobody likes to consider. It's like, who sees flying saucers? It's always 6th grade educated people in Mississippi. Who is it that believes and writes the books on great conspiracies that are keeping everybody down, holding us all back? And you find out it's a guy that's unemployed and lives in a trailer park, outside of Oklahoma City, sometimes outside of Tulsa. And you think, if there's these great banking conspiracies or something holding down the world, you're the least one they got to worry about. And somebody you're going to give hand and suddenly take over, start cashing in and get, take an undue share of their fiscal, hoard. You can hardly make your car payments. The man can barely figure out how to balance his checkbook, but he sure can. Think about it. All right. That's a variation of telling that men who are lost are on a mission, the intelligent are always moody, and that something real dark and evil is always right behind you. Oh, there ain't nothing right behind you, except the same old thing. It's always a matter of death. We're still going to wrap them all up, right? Okay. Don't forget your place. What passes for knowledge amongst the ordinary is far too simple and direct. That is, too simple and direct, and that is always only half of what should be simple and direct. And in conjunction therewith, according to the sense analysis, is this next item that said, of course, the easiest way. You can skip the of course, it was tied in. The easiest way to play like, to pretend that you're somebody special, is to divide up everybody into two groups and place yourself in one of them. Now, a person with a fairly good ear might think something has been left out. Because an ordinary mind might want to say, well, wait a minute, you've got to be more specific. That you're going to place people, divide people up into two groups, like the smart people, and the smart and special people, and then the ordinary Philistine, just the dumb people. Now, if we do that and you put yourself in the first group, then the thing will hold water. The easiest way to play like, to pretend that you're somebody special, is to divide up everybody into two groups and place yourself in one of them. But notice, your mind wants to say, well, wait a minute, that almost makes sense, but you just left out. You got to be specific. So you got to divide up into an admirable, honorable, special group, since we use the word special, and then a group that's non-special. And then you put yourself in one. No. See, now you're getting too pseudo-complex. That is, you only got half of what should be simple and direct, and now you've turned it into something else. The simple and direct is that. You want to throw in other things. Because the simple and direct is this. This is the electrochemical, physical basis of the way the intellect works. Is all you got to do is divide up humanity into two groups. And it doesn't matter what you do after that. Just two groups and put yourself in one of them. You'll do the right thing. I don't have to tell you. You can say humanity. You can just say it. Even though if you're following this, at first you would think that something was left out of this. But then if you didn't stop there, you would go along with it. If somebody says that you went somewhere and you were expecting, you're already pre-sold, it was some sort of important lecture, or it was going to be something worthwhile, the man comes out and you're prepared, you paid your money and you'd read a book or you were pre-sold a little bit, and the man said, well, the first thing I want to point out is that without any doubt you can take all of humanity and quite properly divide them up into two groups. And as soon as they say that, everybody on this planet is immediately going, yeah. You don't say what two groups. You immediately know. Oh, there's no doubt. It's a kind of obviousness about which we should not comment. But suddenly, if you could jump out into everyone's brain on the planet and go, what in the hell are you nodding at? He didn't say what kind of groups. That's too obvious. And you'd go, uh-oh. Of course, you wouldn't, because you just say, get out of my brain. Leave me alone. Or you just think, what the hell kind of comment's that? But how can you explain it? That if the man says, if you hear coming from some important figure or an institution or some pre-sold source that says, we, without any doubt, can intelligently and profitably divide up all of humanity into two groups. And his voice puts a colon or a dash. You're waiting for the two groups. But everybody listening, they don't wait. You immediately go, yep, no doubt about it. No doubt about what? He didn't say what kind of two groups. It doesn't matter. So that's why I was trying to show you that you would have made this, for your ordinary mind, too complex to start with. That if you want to be somebody special, all you got to do is say, all of humanity can be divided up into two groups. And everybody go, oh yeah, no doubt about that. And then put yourself in one of them. And you want to make it complex, like, well, what two groups and which one am I going to put myself in? That's all unnecessary. Oh, I know it is when it gets down to the actual operational level with ordinary people. But if you can understand the basis of it, the reality behind it, then the rest of it is superfluous, to say the very least. That's something that anybody, if I could say superfluous. All you got to do because that's what the mind is doing already. And to do it verbally, and to do it with what appears to be some sanction, some charge of you being an expert on something, and I'm saying you generically, to say you can divide up all of humanity into one finger, 2 groups. And everybody goes, they know that because the mind's doing that already. That's the way it thinks. So all you've done is point out the obvious. All of humanity can be divided up into 2 groups. Then after that, if you were really hard up for a hobby, you could turn to everybody on the planet that nodded immediately and go, all right, which 2 do you think I'm talking about? And you can spend the rest of your life. The short people and the tall people, the green people and the red people, people with long hair, people with short hair. You can ask everybody. Some of them say, well, I agree with the guy that was number 4,600,000, the guy that was over there. But everybody have some kind of, oh yeah, I had something in mind, which they did. So the mind is already dividing everything up into 2 groups. Then all you've got to do is place yourself in one. And it doesn't matter. See, once you understand it doesn't matter what the groups are, you might think, well, if that's true, then it follows it doesn't matter which one you do yourself. It is actually a little more subtle and distinct than just saying, well, if it doesn't matter which 2 groups, it doesn't matter where you put yourself. I know this may be getting sticky, but this is even, if you can see it, a little additionally interesting in a side path kind of way, that it doesn't matter which group you put yourself in. Even if the 2 groups mattered, which they don't. But even if you said all of humanity could be divided up into 2 groups, and you mentioned 2 groups, if that did have some pertinence, then it doesn't matter which one you put yourself in, because everyone understands the nervous system operates on the basis of partisanship, of everything being weighted. So as soon as you say there are 2 groups of people, life can be divided into 2 groups of people, into, I was trying to think of something absolutely innocuous that you couldn't, into the fairly tall and into the average tall. Now say you heard that. It really tells you nothing. What the hell's the difference? Or what does it mean? But the man did, 2 groups. Then he puts himself in one. Now, if you'll listen to your own mind right quick, your mind would want to jump ahead and say, well, in that case, it really doesn't matter because I can't make head nor tail. I'd have no preference. If he asked me, which group would you rather be in? I heard the words, but I got no preference. That doesn't matter. And you can say, well, I'm not going to care which group he puts himself in. Yeah, you say that, but you understand this. Even if the groups, the distinction seems to be a distinction without any difference to you. Whatever group he puts himself in, you'll understand immediately, non-verbally, that he put a distinction on it, or he wouldn't have put himself in the average tall group. All of humanity, says the great speaker, the great leader, the man with whom you're prepared to dance for a few hours after paying your money to sit. He says, first, let's get this established. Without any doubt, we can uniformly, profitably, and intelligently, and properly divide up all of humanity into 2 groups. Those of average height and those that are not too tall at all. And I should be honest with you so that you'll know where I'm coming from. I place myself in, and remember, to you, I tried to make up the 2 groups. He made a distinction, but there didn't seem to be a difference. But there's going to be, because he says, and for me to be honest so that you'll understand the kind of position, the kind of views that I will be expressing, enumerating this evening, I should point out to you that as far as I'm concerned, I personally am in the average height. Now, if right before he said that, if we'd suddenly stopped reality and we jumped into your brain, you jumped into your own brain and went, well, he's going to point out which group he's in, and I don't really see any difference. Or if there is a difference, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. But I don't even think there is one. But as soon as he says, but let me tell you, I'll tell you the group I'm in, then you understand immediately there is a distinction. That he is special. Even if before he said it, you couldn't tell what would be special. I mean, what's even the difference? What's special about being average height or being not too tall or too short? One of those groups. There's no difference, except when the mind says, you can divide up everything into two groups, all people. And then he puts himself in one of the groups, he's then special. Even if right before it, literally, verbally, you couldn't see that there'd be anything special about being in either group. Now would you like to forget descriptions of humanity and get into that which has some pertinence? The world of ideas. Every time the ordinary mind speaks, every time you hear an institution speak, every time you hear a shill for life, that is an ordinary person speak, they are dividing up thoughts. They're dividing up the thinking process into two groups. Now if you're ordinary, you're either going to agree or disagree with any of the divisions they make in an area that interests you, of politics, religion, mores, sex, food, anything. But if you see what I'm talking about now when I use the example of people, that the divisions that that the human mind's ordinarily doing about thinking is equally as impertinent. Except once a person has stated it, once a person has started talking and you never analyze this, that they're about to start expressing weighted opinion, which is all they have, partisan thought, then that which they lean toward, the camps in which they put their money, makes them special. That is, you take the ideas, at least from their view, as being special. And it's no such thing. It's the difference between the two great groups. The most important groups, forget religion, sinners and saints, and forget the intelligent and the dumb, the ugly and the beautiful. Forget all that. I'm going to tell you what's important. It's been hidden for thousands of years. I'm going to tell you it's a matter of whether a man is of average height or whether he's not too tall and not too short. There is the division that will tell, my friends. That is going to be the area that cleaves some of us special people from the rest of the Philistines. And you can say, well, that makes no sense whatsoever. Well, neither does anything else. Not if you are glued to, not if you are reacting to the rest of the world, that is the city, civilization's division of thinking. And of course to them, and at the ordinary level, to you too, if you're at that level, it gets way beyond any sort of silliness like this. It gets down to important matters like the difference between truth and error. Between right and wrong. Yes, it's the same difference. We can divide up ideas into the ideas that are true and correct and those that are false and in error. Or, those of you that like the division that we've established it, instead of calling it that, we can call it into ideas that are of average height and the ideas, the other camp, of the ideas that are not too tall but they're not too short. The continuity of an ordinary man. This was originally, by the way, since I pointed out, mind. Those in the newsroom at my prodding, they changed it because I knew at first reading it might create, in passing, a little more interest. The continuity of an ordinary man is in the repetition of what he thinks. That's how a man stays stable. But for those of you getting a little more individually clever, change it back to what the original was. The continuity of an ordinary mind is in the repetition of what it thinks. Dull. There's stability. Dull. Draw it out. Here on the news item, it wasn't just dull, it was spelled D-U-L-L-L, which according to the style book that we use here in our newsroom, that means to expand the word. The continuity of an ordinary man, the stability of an ordinary mind, the advice, the best approach to take is simple. Be dull. And in conclusion, the simple is humorous. The complex, interesting. And humorous.